Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the virtual plant clinic. I am Lily Browning. I am Dr. Lester's regular co-host, who's filling in for him once again. We may or may not have just been talking to him at a remote location in an RV in the mountains somewhere, but he's happily enjoying some well-deserved vacation. And since he wanted me to fill in today. Last week I had a great guest, my mentor and former boss, Jim Mull from Pasco County Extension. That's where he is now. And it was great with him. And then I thought, who should I bring the next week? And I thought of, right here next to me is Alice Smith. Alice is a Master Gardener volunteer for Hernando County Extension. I'll let her tell you the other things that she is, but if she's not already, she's quickly becoming an expert on Florida native plants. So let me introduce Alice. And Alice, can you tell us what other interests that you have and what projects you have going on?
Additional projects besides the Extension Native Plant Demonstration Garden. I work with the Spring Hill Garden Club and with the Hernando chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. And we support the native plant garden there at the Nature Coast Botanical Gardens in Spring Hill. And that is on Parker Avenue. I actually have the address. It's 1489 Parker Avenue in Spring Hill. So we have about an acre, and we do volunteer work in terms of maintaining it. We had a grant from the Florida Wildflower Foundation where we planted wildflowers so that people could see them. And these are all things that grow in people's yards here in Hernando County, just like with the extension.
You're kind of frozen in time. We can hear you just fine, but your body is frozen there. But you're still giving us great information. Oh, there. Now you're in sync.
Now you can see me.
Yeah. Speaking of the Nature Coast Botanical Gardens, we always say that is the best kept secret in Spring Hill. If you're from this area and you haven't been there yet, it is a fantastic place to go. Like Alice said, it's on Parker Avenue. Is that what it is?
Yes.
And that is right off of Spring Hill Drive. If you're coming from 19, it's not very far at all. And you would turn left by the Bank of America. From the other direction, it's right before you get to that light. And you'll turn right on Parker, and it's right down there a block away next to the fire station. You can go there anytime during daylight hours and walk around and look, correct?
Yes, and it's also free admission. Mm-hmm. So it's a gift really to the citizens of the county from the garden club to be able to go there. And you can even have birthday parties and their weddings and all kinds of stuff. And they have now paved pathways so that people can bring relatives and family that maybe are handicapped and need to be, have a level pathway that they can push wheelchairs or walkers or things, which is nice. We see people now coming who didn't have access before. So it's great.
And volunteers, you each kind of adopt an area with a theme per se. Is that correct?
Correct. So my adopted area is the native plant garden.
Wonderful.
And we're actually the largest area. We're in the northeast corner of the gardens. So that's, a great place. And they have a small nursery that they sell plants on Saturday and Monday mornings from 9 to noon. And there's a table for Florida native plants.
Okay.
And the other great place to go is the Master Gardener nursery that we have, that our Master Gardeners run. And that is at 19490 on Oliver Street in Brooksville. And it's right before you get to the animal control, right there on the fairgrounds off of 41, Highway 41. That's another good place to find native plants as well as lots of Florida friendly plants.
And with little to no chemicals put on those plants. You rely on your biological control there to keep them looking healthy and good. Isn't that correct?
Yes, exactly.
And they are open Wednesdays and Saturdays. Right now in the summer, 8 to 11. Is that correct?
I think maybe 11:30 is the, yeah. But for sure, 8 to 11. And
Right.
both of the nurseries take cash or personal checks, but they do not take credit cards. So if you're going to go shop there, be sure you have either cash or a checkbook with you.
And they're both great places, yes. Here we have a Facebook user, so obviously Facebook is cooperating with StreamYard today. Who lets us know that they go to the Nature Coast Botanical Gardens often. And there's a new sculpture just being completed using a tree stump to sculpt a sandhill crane family. I'm gonna have to go see that. Have you seen that?
Yes, it's absolutely beautiful. And the sculptor used a chainsaw, which is amazing to me. The beautiful detail. And it's a very old oak tree that was damaged. Another tree next to it last year when we had one of our windstorms, it damaged it. And rather than taking the tree down, they've been able to turn it into a sculpture. And it's there in the Bromeliad Gardens. It's beautiful.
Very nice. So I think I'm going to try to share the little PowerPoint I put together so we can, where did it go? Oh, I got to try something else here. Because StreamYard is a bit different than Zoom. You know, you got to do different things. I got to open it first and then share it, which gets pretty confusing. Let's see. Share the window. There it is. Oh, you're getting a sneak peek. Can you see that, Alice?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, first, while I'm sharing, I'm blind to the rest of you. So since Dr. Lester, you know, I am his regular co-host, and now he wants me to fill in, I fixed his logo. There we go. So at least for now. And again, we already introduced Alice. And these are some of the native plants that she helped plant in front of the extension office.
And Lily, before we go on, I just wanted to point out, I am not the president
of
the Hernando chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. Our president is Janet Grabowski, but I'm an active member and I coordinate the program over at the Native Plant Garden.
Okay, I was trying to promote you.
I know. But that's all right.
Was instrumental in a very exciting project. Before we get to that, because Bill has me hosting, I'm going to remind everyone of the Hernando County watering restrictions. This applies even if you have a well. But the great thing we're going to learn about from Alice is the more natives you bring in, once they're established, every plant needs water to get established. Once they're established, they're meant to be here. You're going to save a lot of water. Two things I want you to look at here. As I mentioned, the extension office moved into their current location. I don't know how many years ago now. You know, we all lost a year, so maybe 5 years ago or so. And they sort of created a nice garden in front of it. And I don't know all the ins and outs how it came to be that Alice became instrumental in saying, hey, let's put 100% natives out there. And if you want to see that process, you can go to this YouTube link. We don't have time to watch it right now, but it is also on my Facebook page as well as Extension's Facebook page. Scroll through there. You'll see the link. You'll see Alice standing there with Sean and
Derek.
Derek?
Yes.
Yes. And how they started from the beginning. And if you go visit right now, and we'll give you the address, it's just gorgeous. Makes me really jealous. I've started one in the fall, and then that was probably not the right time to start it. So it's really just now in my yard trying to come, and look decent, and doesn't look near as nice as yours. But
thanks.
Alice, can you explain to us this graphic you wanted me to show?
Yes. Well, one of the impetuses for putting all native plants out at the extension office for homeowners to come by and other people, visitors, to see them growing and thriving in a variety of conditions like shade and partial sun and full sun, is because homeowners and a lot of people are getting very concerned about what's happening around the world, and especially in our country, with the decline of pollinators and butterflies and bird species. So in some cases, we've lost 70% of some of the bird species. We're at critical levels now with the monarch butterfly. And they're concerned that it may become extinct in North America because of the rapid decline. All of this is due to just a lot of factors, including loss of habitat and loss of native plants that all of the pollinators that our crops and our agriculture and our plants depend on, as well as to provide pollinators. The plants provide the pollen and the nectar for the pollinators. And it's like a great circle of life. So the birds eat the pollinators, and especially caterpillars, and they need that insect pollen so that they can feed their young. So if they don't have enough insect pollen to feed the babies that the hatchlings, then the hatchlings get malnourished and die. And then we have this vicious cycle of decline of bird species. So the idea is to plant more natives along with our other Florida-friendly plants, but to plant Florida natives that are attractive to our Florida pollinators. So here are some examples that are easy to grow, thrive in our hot and humid summers here. So dwarf wild coffee is one. It produces, you can see on it some white little flowers that bees and other pollinators like, and then it produces beautiful red berries that are eaten by the birds, especially mockingbirds love it, other birds. And if you plant it in a pot, like it's shown there, the birds come and they'll perch on the side of the pot, and they'll just carefully pick out the berries one by one. So that's a great plant. It's an evergreen. It likes shade, partial shade. If you put it in full sun, it turns yellow. I found that out the hard way. So plant it. It's great for those shady areas in your yard where you're wondering, what in the world can I plant here, or what's going to thrive? The other version of wild coffee is the regular size, not the dwarf, which can get 6 to 10 feet and about 5 to 6 feet wide. And both of these grow well in the shade and moderate once established, moderate to partially dry conditions. They don't do well with total lack of water, but they're good in that. And then the other one just shows you, here's our native salvia, which we call common name tropical sage. This is the red, the scarlet one. There's also a pink one that grows native, and then the albino version, which is white. But the birds love the scarlet one. And here's one of our finches that has come. It's perching on the plant and eating carefully. They come and they pick off the dried seeds, and the plant is still blooming and producing those tubular red blooms. And every day I have hummingbirds in my yard that come to my red salvia. They make the rounds of the plants, and then they go off to the firebush and other plants for their nectar.
Salvia,
but that's
self-seeding as well too, correct?
It's a self-seeder, and so it blooms almost all year round. If there's a hard freeze, it might die back, but it can grow and bloom. It can get between 2 to 4 feet by 2 to 4 feet wide. Nice. So it's a great plant. And once you have one, if you don't put too much mulch around it and the seeds fall, then you'll have other ones, seedlings that will come up, and you can move them around all over the place. And it does well in pots. So that's something that you can put on your patio. It handles full sun, and it also likes partial shade. So it's a very versatile plant, one of my favorite starter plants.
Nice. Now this one on the left, I don't know if it's you'll have to answer if it's that same oxeye, or you'll have to tell me what it is. But Jim Mull, who was with me last week, when I get to these kind of things, I revert to what he taught me. This is what he learned in college. It's a DYC, which we'll say darn yellow composite. That's what he had to identify. And that's what the students called them. So if you can let us know what that is.
Yeah, this is actually one of my, I always say every plant I talk about that's native, I end up saying this is my favorite plant. But it's because once you've started growing them and you see how strong and resilient they are and how well they do under adverse conditions, they bloom their hearts out for the whole season, then you start to think of them as your favorite plant. But the one in the foreground, the yellow one, is part of the aster family, and it's called Starry Rosin weed.
Okay.
And you can see at the bottom of the plant, it has a kind of a green basil leaf, leaves, and then you have blooms that come up on stalks that can be, or stems, about 2 feet, comes up 2 to 3 feet, multiple flowers on each of the stems that come up, that bloom for a long time. And because they have an open face, they're great for many of the butterflies and the bees and other pollinators that need a landing pad where they're going to, while they're trying to nectar. And this plant starts blooming in spring, and it blooms all the way through first frost. And once the stems, the flowers have died back on a stem, you can just cut it down to the basal leaves, and it'll produce another stem during the growing season and continue growing. So last year I cut mine back 3 times, and I got three growths of these beautiful yellow daisy-like flowers. Behind it is what we call narrow leaf ironweed.
Ooh, I got that one.
And it's a smaller version of a giant ironweed. And this one starts again blooming about the same time. This is April when the picture was taken. And it has narrow stems, and if you let both of these plants, if you let them form seeds and some of the seeds drop into the ground, if it's not too heavily mulched, then they will produce a lot of seedlings that you can share. Or in the case of the ironweed, they produce large clumps. And again, you cut this one back this time of year, mid to the end of July, and you'll get another growth on it and more blooms in the early fall. This is a favorite of a variety of pollinators, including all kinds of butterflies, skippers, and bees. And we have both of these plants growing at the Extension Service demonstration gardens, so you can come see that. On the other one on the right, we have the Florida native black-eyed Susan, and we call it Rudbeckia hirta. And it blooms early spring to about now. Most of the ones we have at the Extension office are almost finished their blooming season. This is another great plant. It doesn't get too large. It's bushy. You can put it to the front of the garden bed. Maybe it grows 1.5 to 2 feet high, and it's a great reseeder. And behind it, you can see a fire bush that is a hummingbird magnet. And I prefer to use these firebush and the salvias and the other plants, the native plants that attract the hummingbirds, rather than hanging feeders, because when it gets so hot, you've got to change the water, the sugar water in the feeder almost every day or two to prevent the fungus that will kill the birds from growing in that sugar water.
And I'm sure the native plants for the native hummingbirds have exactly what they need. Not
exactly.
Just sugar water. This is one of my favorites. I love Kunti.
Yeah, the Kunti, a lot, when you don't know about this plant, when you first see it, you think, is that a fern or is that a palm? But it's not either of those. It's how do you say it, cycad? Cycad. And that means that it doesn't produce flowers. It produces cones that come up through the middle of the plant. And some of the plants are male and the other plants are female. And that's how they reproduce, is the female's cone splits open and all these bright orangish red seeds fall out to the ground, and then they get fertilized by the male plant. But these are great because they handle almost any kind of soil.
They do.
They do well in any kind of conditions like drier or somewhat semi-moist or moist. And they're great foundation plants. You can see these are here growing along the side of my house. And what I've learned from growing these, well, also they're evergreen. What I've learned from growing these is you need to plant them at least 4 feet away from your house. And you need to plant them between 4 and 5 feet apart, because you can see they're starting to spread. They'll get between 3 and 4 feet tall, and some can go 4 to 5 feet wide. They grow slowly, but over time you'll have a beautiful mass of evergreen plants. They do not need to be pruned. The only thing you would do is when some of the dead, leaves at the bottom, or fronds, whatever you want to call it, you might trim those back if they die. But other than that, there's no pruning required on these plants.
I only have one right now. It's tiny and I'm babying it, but I do plan on getting more. But where I am not going to put them, as much as I love them, is in the little fenced backyard where my dogs run, because all cycads And she mentioned those red berries and stuff, extremely poisonous to dogs. So that is, you know, if you have a dog that likes to taste things, just exercise caution and don't put these where your dogs can get them.
That's right. Also, before we go on to this next slide, I wanted to mention with the flowers, can we go back to those?
Sure.
Can you go back one more? That all these flowers do very well in dry, full sun, or a little bit of moisture. They do not require a lot of moisture to produce blooms like this. And all of them are, they're not, well, I guess you could say deciduous in the wintertime, except for the rosin weed. The basal leaves stay intact. But the other ones will die back, but they'll come back in the spring. So, sorry.
Now this, people are going to say, what the heck? You're telling me this is a plant, this is a weed in my lawn. It's one of our favorite weeds, isn't it?
It is a favorite. Well, like I said, all of my plants that I've been growing, my native ones are my favorites. But this is a wonderful ground cover. This picture here, I've got it in my yard in a confined area, and it's gotten very thick and dense. And frog fruit is also known as matchstick weed sometimes, or turkey tangle, or it has a variety of names. Fog fruit, not frog fruit, but
turkey tangle, frog fruit, turkey tangle, yeah, frog fruit.
Exactly. But you can see this one is in full bloom, and it has the little characteristic matchstick flowers that are on it. It's it grows maybe a foot if left in a situation like this where it becomes very dense. And what's great about it, this is a host plant for 3 Central Florida butterflies. And a lot of small moths and other small pollinators come to this from when it starts blooming in the late spring all the way through the fall. This is considered evergreen, but if we have a real hard freeze, there'll be parts of it that may die back. And you just cut them out with, shears or with a weed whacker, and it comes back. It's a great ground cover. You can use it as turf replacement, and you can walk on it if it's not a heavily trafficked area. So if you want to replace some of the lawn that you have, and you don't want to have to be mowing all the time and fertilizing and all of that, then this is a great plant. It tolerates dry to moderate water. And in a lot of our homes where we have HOAs and they water once a week, this stuff just thrives. This does real well. It likes sun. For full blooming, it'll tolerate partial shade, but not full shade. It doesn't do well. It won't bloom for you in full shade.
It's mixed in with my lawn. It put itself there, and I certainly don't mind it. Also, it gets into that wildflower bed that I'm trying to create. So when and I never planted it anywhere, but when I weed that wildflower bed, I leave this there, because that's the point of that whole bed, is to attract the pollinators and the butterflies.
Well, and it provides a great mulch, really, for those beds. I have it growing under some of the small trees that I planted, and it really keeps the moisture in the ground when it goes around them, and it's fine to leave it. You don't have to cut it. Now, some people, if you want to grow it in your yard as part of your lawn, you can mow it. Usually you set your mower to about 4 inches. You don't want it too low, and you can mow it 3 times a year. That's what I've heard as a recommendation. You can also use a weed whacker to cut it back but don't overdo it. 2 or 3 times a week to keep it in the shape is
Yeah,
great.
that dense stand of it. But if you have it intermixed in your lawn, we just mow our lawn as needed, and this does fine, through
Right.
the mowing too.
And if you come to the extension office, you'll see the frog fruit growing in the Bahia grass lawn, and it's beautiful. It's blooming its head off, and it just gets mowed down periodically when the landscapers come, and it's there. So that gives you an idea of what it looks like mixed within the lawn. And we also have some of it growing, starting it in one of the beds along the building to fill in, like you said, with your wildflower bed to kind of creep along and fill in and bring more pollinators.
But I want to point out here when when Alice gets started more, this is her home, and as you can see, this is in a deed restricted gated community here in Hernando County. So you can be Florida friendly and live in an HOA, because Alice is proof thereof. Go ahead, Alice.
Yeah. Well, this is my home is on the curve of one of the streets in my community, which is Timber Pines, and I had wanted to provide some screening. We had a tree that was the wrong tree in the wrong place, rather than the right plant in the right place. And the tree ended up tearing up both the sidewalk and the patio. So when we had to remove the tree, then I wanted something to fill in. And then I wanted to, when we, of course, had to replace the patio, I wanted, if I sat out there, I didn't want to be just like fatally available to everybody who walked around.
Yeah.
So I wanted some screening so it would be a beautiful place to sit and just enjoy myself and be very semi-private. So in our HOA, we're not allowed to do hedges. Don't ask me why, but we're not. That's one of the rules. And you can remove some of your lawn. You don't have to be 100% St. Augustine grass, which is what you see there. You can have 50%, or, if you appeal to the Architectural Control Committee, you can have less than 50% grass in your yard if you have a plan. So first I talked to the HOA president in my village here, and he was fine with landscaping. And then I looked at the rules about, well, you need to keep any trees or anything at least 6 feet back from the curb. And so I measured that. And then I went to the utility companies and I had them come out and mark the area because I have an easement. And you can see where the grass is next to the road is where the easement is. The lines run under there. So I knew that's where the lines were. So I was going to leave that in grass, and then I wanted an edging. So I put in some dividers, edgers, just so the grass wouldn't run all over everything, and I could keep the mulch in control and kind of have a boundary. So things looked a little more, not like the wild woolly west kind of thing. And the plants that you see here, in the background, the kind of shrubby ones back there, those I planted 3 Walter Viburnums with Lacucci. That's the plant. There are 3 Walter Viburnums that grow naturally in the wild here in Florida. One is the Densa variety, which is smaller. The Withlacoochee is medium sized, so it grows like 12 to 15 feet. And I thought, well, that would be nice to provide enough screen.
Mhm.
So when I sat out there, I wouldn't look at the neighbors' garages across the way. I'd have a little privacy. And it produces beautiful little white flowers, sometimes twice a year. And then it has berries, and the birds love the berries. And as it gets bigger, there's the potential that the birds could use it for nesting sites. So I thought, oh, this is great. I can add some habitat to my yard as well as providing screening. And then in front of it, if you look to the just down in front of it, the well, no, back
Here.
that's the frog fruit.
Oh, wow.
That's where
That's cool.
I made a bed and I just put that so it would cover the area. And underneath that is the stump of the tree that we had to cut down, which was an old established tree. And there was no way, even though we ground the stump to get it level, there was no way I could plant. And it'll be years before anything, but the frog fruit doesn't care.
Yeah.
It goes right over the top and it's thriving really well. And then to the front, those are my starry rosin weeds that we saw in the other picture. And then in front of that, I put at the very end a dwarf variety of a Simpson stopper, which is another native plant. This will get 5 feet by 5 feet, and it'll provide just a little extra interest. I didn't want to have a monoculture of only Walter's Viburnums, so this provides a different plant. And right now it's covered in orange berries. It blooms in the spring. It has fragrant to die for blossoms, and it attracts it's covered in pollinators when it's blooming, and then it sets berries. And now I have all kinds of birds that come and they go all through the plant all day long and they pick off the right berries one by one. So it's a delight to watch it, and it's great to know that the birds, the wild birds, especially the hummingbirds, seem to love it.
Great.
And
these little guys here.
those are Coreopsis, or tick seed.
Mm-hmm.
And Coreopsis is the native wildflower of
Florida.
the state of Florida. And that particular, we have about 16 varieties, I think, of Coreopsis. I'm not sure exactly on the number, but that particular one is a yellow on yellow flower, and it's called lanceolata.
Mm-hmm.
And we have it growing at the Extension Service, just like the dwarf Simpson stopper I just talked about. We have growing at the Extension Demonstration Garden. The native variety of tick seed is called Leavenworthy, and it produces a yellow petal with dark brown center, and they look like little miniature black-eyed Susans. And that blooms a little bit later in the spring, and it grows like 2 feet. It's very airy, open kind of shrub. Both of the varieties of tick seed are available to see at the Extension office. And then I have across the way a Florida-friendly plant, which a lot of people like.
I'm not sure if that's native there.
No, that's not a native. It's a Florida-friendly, non-native.
Uh-huh.
And that is a shrimp plant. It comes originally from Mexico, and it loves full sun. And I forgot to mention, the area that you're looking at, that planting area, is a full sun area. And when you say something needs full sun, we're talking 6 or more hours a day of direct sunlight. And this particular location is to the street side is to the east. To the dwarf Simpson stopper at the front of the screen is north. To where the shrimp plant is west. And then the back part, is south. So I get sunlight the way the sun is, because there are no other shade trees around. I get full sun in this all through the summertime. And these plants get watered once a week when the HOA sprinkler waters. To establish them, I watered them for 4 weeks every day, just to get the roots established, and then I just I watch them during a drought when we had it really dry for a couple of months. I added 1 supplement of water per week to it, but I'm trying to get them. I'm trying to make sure that they don't get overwatered. They don't need overwatering. But my shrimp plant is there. That was the first plant I planted when I moved here before I knew anything about Florida native plants. And my neighbors love it because it's pretty showy. And so I leave it for them and also for the hummingbirds.
Yeah,
they come.
It's that splash of color. And what you're pointing out here, not only can you do a Florida-friendly landscape in an HOA that is very beneficial for our pollinators. If you're like me, sometimes you overwhelm yourself thinking, if I go native, I have to go 100% native. And then you end up doing nothing. So and what I always try to say, if everyone in the state got 3 native plants to put in their yard this year, can you imagine how beneficial that would be across the state? So it's not always an all or nothing. And Florida-friendly plants are not all native. All native plants are Florida-friendly, but not all Florida-friendly plants are native. And you can combine the two, but the more natives you have, the more pollinators, the better you're going to do for the environment. Here's another view of your yard as well. What's going on here?
So if you walk just down the road a little bit around the bend, that's the front entrance to my home. And I had it screened in because I had to have a place away from the mosquitoes so I could enjoy my morning coffee. So you can see this is the end of the bed that we were looking at. I put in another dwarf Simpson stopper to the left of the bird feeder. And then to the right of the bird feeder immediately is a regular size Simpson stopper, which will grow about 15 feet. They're considered small understory trees. And it's covered in that picture in blooms, fragrant blooms.
Are Simpson stoppers natives?
Yes,
they are.
Simpson stoppers are native.
Okay, I know sometimes I've heard arguments about that. That was just...
Well, there are a variety of stoppers, but the Simpson stopper is a native.
Okay, great.
And then immediately to the right, just at the edge of the screen, that is one of the Walters Viburnum with Lacucci's. So it's providing the kind of screening that I wanted. And then if you look behind the bird feeders, you'll see 2 more Walter with Lacucci's. And I planted those because our air conditioning system is there. And I wanted to screen that from view and also from some of the sun in an effort to kind of protect it. And then you can see in the foreground, there's the frog fruit coming around the corner in the bed. And in the very back left corner, do you see that round? That is a Walter's Viburnum Densa. So that's the small version of the other one, and it has a completely different look. It looks round, or it's actually conical shaped, and that grows to a max of 6 feet by about 5 to 6 feet, and it's so dense. You can see how dense it is. It's marvelous. The birds love it. They'll zoom into it to hide. And again, it has the flowers and the fruit that the other Walters produce for the birds. And that plant has never been trimmed.
Oh, really?
You do not need to trim those plants. You can, if you want to cut it back. If you don't want it that big, you could cut it back. But I've never, ever had to do any trimming, which is great. You put it in, it grows, it fills in. You can see how it screens the view of homes.
Yeah, I was thinking a
back
whole
there.
hedgerow of those would look fantastic, you know.
They would. You want to space them far enough apart. So you need to go maybe 5 feet apart, not too close, so they don't run into each other. But that's the view that I wanted it so it's somewhat private, but still as neighbors pass, they know we're there, or they can see us sometimes on the porch and they can wave, but it gives us a sense of privacy. And then I left a little walk space, if you go back there, because the delivery people sometimes pull up on the yard. And so I wanted to make sure there was a place where you could access the front door and I could get around in the garden. I could get around to the other side.
Very nice.
And then this is just that same view, but from just at the porch. Looking out. So that's the view that I have. You can see that how effective it's been in screening some of the buildings and the driveways and stuff across the way. And to the very front is another wonderful native plant called button sage. And it grows about 5 by 5. It's screening the air conditioner there. And it has little tiny button-shaped yellow pinkish flowers, and it's loved by pollinators. And if you have a real dry space and sunny, this is one that will do very well in a drier full sun environment. And it it does okay getting once a week. I can't control that. But you'll see to the left of the bird bath, I have
that coral bean there.
No, those are my tropical sage.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I didn't plant those. Those just scattered from some of the seeds, and they came up, and I just let them thrive. And then in front of that, down on the ground, this way, no, towards me. I don't know that it picks it up in the picture, but I have another interesting ground cover that is called Twin Flower. And again, you'll see that one at the Extension Service office. And Twin Flower is a host plant for the common buckeye butterfly. And it forms a beautiful thick mound with tiny blue flowers that bloom in the spring all the way through the fall. And it is evergreen also. So all of the plants you're looking at are mostly evergreen. And then this was the view that I created from the patio. So I was sitting out on the patio, and so there right in front of you is the frog fruit. And I have to the left of it, there was some space, so I stuck in to the left of the frog fruit there. I had some Coreopsis volunteered itself in that area. And there's another red Salvia, and I have some tuberosa, which is the butterfly milkweed growing there. And at the very front by the sidewalk lining it is St. John's wort. All of those are plants that like it full sun and dry. And then to the far left, you'll see this silvery plant. It's called Florida Mountain Mint. And it comes, it's a deciduous plant, and it comes out in the spring, and in the summer it blooms, and those blooms are silver colored. So it adds a little interest in terms of color, and it's beloved by pollinators, just like the dotted horsenet is.
And in the pot, you have pentas.
Yeah, that's another Florida-friendly favorite that's a non-native, but it's a great nectar source. And the butterflies really like the red pentas. And what I've discovered is that the bumblebees, the native bumblebees that visit, will come to this red, even though they say bumblebees prefer, white and
yellow,
purple, but they come to that too. So, and then in front of the pot is a volunteer on the ground down there, tropical sage, down to the front of the pot.
Oh, okay, here.
Yeah, and right now it's all covered in red blooms, and this morning I watched the hummingbird.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and then this is the entrance, the walkway, and that just shows, again, how, trying to screen that air conditioner and provide some privacy. And that is a cutleaf coneflower, a yellow cutleaf coneflower. That's a native plant. And it's a yellow with a dark cone shaped blossom, and lots of pollinators. And when the warblers come through in the migration in the fall, they come and they eat the seeds out of it. So when the flowers die, I don't cut them down. I leave them because I know that the little finch and stuff are going to come and eat the seeds. So that one gets kind of tall. Oh, this just shows
the process. Yes.
Right. That shows getting it marked and kind of putting some of the plants out, and it shows what the area was before. And when I started, I was anxious to get my, I have a regular Simpson stopper that we're looking at to the right, and then the Withlapuchis behind it. And I did it kind of backwards in that I put them in, and then I went back to remove the turf grass, which was back-breaking work. But anyway, you can see the beginning of the bed that
so
we just looked
at.
You
just had this boring turf yard like everyone has, and now you have this beautiful oasis.
Right.
And it can be done, and it can be done in an HOA. I'm just throwing in my classes that I have. I need to, if you have questions, which I can't see them right now, but I'm going to get back, see if there's anything in the chat. But this is Dr. Lester's email address, wlester@ufl.edu, and mine, Lily, LILLYB, @hernandocounty.us. If you want to visit the native plant demonstration garden at the extension office, here is their address, 16110 Aviation Loop Drive. It is right next to the post office that's on Spring Hill Drive. So it's pretty easy to find there. And you can, it's outside, so you can go by pretty much any time and look it over. And if you go when they're there, they can probably ask a lot of questions for you, answer a lot of questions. Okay, let's see. Now I see the chat. Austin says hi. He watches us from Wisconsin, I believe. Works in a nursery there. Will the viburnum live in a shady area? How quickly do they grow?
Well, they do well in partial shade. Full shade, they would, I don't think they would grow well, but they grow in full sun, they grow fairly quickly. So the ones that you saw were planted from 3-gallon pots in the summer, July of 2019. And the pictures you saw of them at about, how tall were they then? About 10 feet were this summer. So that's 2021. So in 2 years, they've grown quickly. In partial shade, they'll grow a little slower. They will probably won't be quite as dense, and they may not grow as tall as the 12 to 15 feet. But they should, they grow moderately fast in partial shade.
Okay. And Nancy has a question about Liatris. Her Liatris has lots of mealybugs. Her plan is to cut back the affected areas instead of using pesticides. That's my number one rule. That's what I always do. I'm too lazy to figure out what kind of pesticide and go to the store and use it. And plus, our whole intention is to bring the pollinators. Pollinators and pesticides just do not make a good combination at all. Do you have any other advice for her Liatris?
Yeah, if they're really infested, I agree to cut it back. I had some that I took the garden hose and I put it on high pressure, and I actually blew the mealybugs and all of their stuff off of the plants, and it didn't damage the plants. So that was a week ago. I'm going to have to go back and see if they all returned or not. But that's a mechanical way you can deal with it first. And if it doesn't work, then I would use insecticidal soap. And the recommendation is to use it early in the morning, like 7:30, before it gets warm, and before the pollinators come out, to minimize, because there are some soaps that,
Sure.
will dry in 15 minutes, and then they don't seem as harmful as others.
Yeah, that's one of the least toxic methods. Doesn't have any residual, real pesticide. It literally is just soap, but, read that label. And what happens is the insects that you're after, especially like mealybugs or those soft-bodied kind, they don't have lungs. They have breathing holes literally all over them. So what that soap or horticultural oil does is smother them, basically. And Lee says, thank you. I really enjoyed this, Alice, and it makes me excited. And actually, is it next week already? Yeah, we're going to go visit with the GM at her community. Dr. Lester and I are. And I get to go to Alice's house and see that pretty yard for myself. Bring in the camera so I can take pretty pictures too. But like I said, it's great that you show us several things. You show us it can be done beautifully in a neighbor-pleasing way in an HOA. And you show us that, don't get hung up on you have to be 100% native. If that's your goal, I applaud you, go for it, great. But don't let that goal be too lofty that you just don't ever do anything. Every little bit that you do, every native you bring in, every time you don't use a chemical, you are helping, our state to recover, maybe bring some of those pollinators back. So, yeah, and the other thing I would suggest, I was thinking as you were talking, like the wild coffee, some of the others, if you're not knowledgeable about native plants, you might make a mistake and actually get a plant that is an invasive exotic that looks like it, or, is not what you intended to get. So I would always suggest seeking the advice You can call the extension office. You can go by the Master Gardener Nursery, and make sure if something's growing, because you said the wild coffee, likes to grow in the shade, and I imagine people would be like, "Ooh, the wooded lot beside me, there's lots of it growing." Probably not, right, Alice? That is probably an invasive exotic called coral ardesia, which does look different, but you have to have a trained eye to see them apart. So bring part of it to the extension office. Say, can I use this or shouldn't I? We're here as a resource to help you. And you can always email, or take a picture, email it to me, email it to Dr. Lester. If we don't know, we'll email it back and forth to each other. If neither one of us know, we'll start going out finding other people. We have lots of contacts, to find out who does know this stuff.
And come by the Extension Service office to see the plants that we have.
Absolutely.
Because we have signage now with QR codes. So you can get all of the characteristics and planting information for the plants and decide if any of those would be something you want to use in your yard.
High-tech native garden. That's pretty cool. Combining the best of both worlds. That's neat there. And if you look back on my Facebook page, Hernando FFL program, or you go to Hernando EXT Facebook page, you can find that YouTube video of Alice, Sean, and Derek. And they started with just grass, marking with chalk lines and string and spray paint, and then cutting up the grass and putting in the flowers. And it's really neat to watch the transformation and then go out and see it. It is just gorgeous. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll have to tell Dr. Lester everything went fine. And I really enjoyed today's program, and thank you for sharing what you do with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everybody. We will see you next week. Dr. Bill will be back. We will see you then. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.